In just over a month's time, I will be standing on the elite start line for the London Marathon. I'll be looking to go faster than the 2:25 time I ran in Berlin last year. And today, I want to have an honest chat about what my chances really are at the London Marathon. And because training for every marathon is always so different, I want to talk about what I've learned in this training block so far. And hopefully some of that can be useful to you guys for whatever you're training towards. And that's not everything. I'm also going to talk you through exactly what a week of marathon training looks like for me. I'm going to be using last week's training. It was 108 miles or 174 kilometers, and marathon training is all about the ups and downs. So hopefully you can learn something, maybe laugh at my expense, and ultimately get an unfiltered insight into what it's like to be an elite athlete training for the London Marathon and hoping to make my first World Championships team. Let's get into it. If you're new around here, here's a whistle-stop tour for you on my marathon career to date. In 2022, I ran my first marathon in the beautiful city of Seville. I ran 2 hours, 34 minutes and 28 seconds, I think. Yes, that was my chip time. And as it tends to go with your first marathon, it was a baptism of fire. I ran a positive split. I hit the wall a little bit in the last 10K, but crossing the finish line, I knew I was gonna be doing this again because there is no feeling like it. So the following year, I came back for more. I just loved the pain so much. And I actually got selected for England to run at the Copenhagen Marathon. They were taking a small developmental team to get some international experience on the roads, and I ran a 2:29 and 16 seconds, and I also managed to accidentally come third. I didn't even realize I was in third place until someone shouted at me with 600 meters to go that I was in fact in third place. And that went pretty well. I ran a negative split, had a pacemaker for half the race, and I think doubling my experience in the marathon doubled the knowledge I had, but it also doubled the questions that were unanswered. Anyone else watching this run a couple of marathons? Sound familiar? I came back the following year in 2024, in January, and I ran the Houston Marathon. I ran a 2-second PB, 2 seconds faster than Copenhagen, 2:29.14, but completely different race experience. I was solo for most of it, ran a pretty big positive split. I think I went through halfway on pace for 2:25, 2:26. Ouch. And really had to dig deep and rally for those 2 seconds. But was very proud of myself. Again, learned a lot about myself and about the event. And I also maintained my streak just of running a PB at every marathon I do. And then I came back later in 2024, in September, to do my first ever major. Berlin, baby! And if you haven't seen that video from the Berlin Marathon, I would highly recommend you go and watch it. It's up there in one of my top 5 days of the best days in running. I ran a pretty big PB to finish in 2 hours, 25 minutes and 47 seconds. Which brings me to where we are now, a mere 6 months later, training for major number 2, and probably the most exciting major of them all, for me personally, the London Marathon. I'm a little bit excited. So we are just over a month out from the London Marathon, and it's going pretty well. Overall, I would say that this training block so far has been pretty good. It's not been perfect. I don't think perfect exists. I definitely have never experienced the perfect marathon training block, and when you're training for one race and that is your sole focus for 12 weeks, in my case, for some people it's longer, you know, you might be doing a 16-week or a 20-week block, it's pretty impossible to get everything right. Some things are gonna go wrong, and some of those things are within your control, or maybe they're partially within your control, and some of them just aren't. There's gonna be things that come up along the way, and I'm a big believer that part of training for a marathon and your success on the day and in the block overall is how you react to those things that come up. It's not writing a perfect plan and then executing it perfectly. It's adapting and advancing as much as you possibly can when those roadblocks come up. And one of the things I was so proud of in the Berlin marathon block, which may just have been the fact that it was the summer and there's less things going around because I'm not training for a marathon in the winter. But I was so proud of the fact that I didn't get sick. It was the first marathon block that I didn't pick up an illness in. And I was really wanting to bring that into this training block too. I didn't. One of the hardest things to deal with so far in this training block has been picking up an illness. I got a cold about 3 weeks ago, and you can Google as much as you want how to shorten a cold, how to get rid of a cold really quick. It's a virus. There's no hacks. You have to do the really predictable, common sense things. Rest, drink loads of water, sleep a lot, reduce your training load or intensity, and let time do its thing. Okay, you can drink turmeric in a smoothie, and maybe Epsom salt baths might help a little bit. You can take paracetamol and ibuprofen to take the edge off, but it's just gonna run its course, and you're gonna have to run less because of it. It sucks, but it's one of those things. So that came up and interrupted my flow. I was really on a roll until that came up, but it happens. And I think actually the experience I have from getting sick in marathon blocks so far put me in a really good spot to recognize that this was just one of those things and deal with it as best I could, which I think I did. And I'll say we dipped down in intensity a little bit, but I didn't have to drop my volume really at all this time around, which is incredible. And I think my body was in such a good place when I got sick that I was able to kind of rely on that. If that's not the case for you and you get sick in a marathon block, please remember that it's not the end of the world. The world will end next week! In a week to 10 days time, you will feel miles better. You might have to cut a session or a long run and feel a bit naff on your easy runs, but as long as you keep the intensity down, you're keeping an eye on your heart rate and, making sure that it's not going to your chest, you're gonna be fine. It's very easy to be dramatic in the moment. But something I have learned from experience is that you will be fine. Everything will be okay. And something I come back to time and time again, a lot of the time when I'm talking to the athletes that I coach about the marathon specifically, is you really learn so much from just doing the thing. So that's the block itself, a start to finish training block. Making it through that training block is always such a huge success anyway. Not letting one of those roadblocks be the end of that marathon journey. But then also the race itself. Getting through that race, experiencing that race, picking up on the things that you've learned during the race, the decisions you made, were they the right ones? Would you do anything different last time? And as I sit here looking at the sort of overview, if you like, of the 5 marathon blocks, or nearly 5, because I'm halfway through the 5th one, that I've done so far, I can see that learning in data and in numbers, which is really cool. I'm so glad I've collected all of this. And you know what? I'll give you a little peek. You can have a look at this and pause the screen if you want to, just to see the difference in that first marathon I did in 2022 all the way to where I am now, on the most part in the volume category. There she is. So I've got my first marathon block here. These are my weekly mileage totals, and these are my longest runs of the week. And it goes all the way through. The Berlin block was a little bit shorter because I had a track season at the back end of that. So this down here is my maximum volume of the block. And then you've got the average volume and the average long run that goes all the way through. In Seville, I averaged 63 miles a week. Fast forward to London, the grayed out weeks here are in the future, but I'm gonna average 100 miles a week, which is 160.9 kilometers. You can also see some of the words I've written alongside the table there. Momentum, consistency, relax, rest, recovery. A little insight into my mind there, if you will. I've learned so much about the impact of volume and increasing my weekly volume across these blocks, but in this block alone, I feel like that is twofold. Last time around in Berlin, I went over 100 miles 3 times in a compressed 10-week block. So far in the London block, I've gone over 100 5 times, and 4 of them have been the last 4 weeks in a row. If you'd have told me that 2 years ago when I ran Copenhagen, or even 1 year ago when I ran Houston and hit my first 100-mile week, I don't think I'd have believed you. So on the one hand, I've learned that running more makes you faster, but you have to have the things around the running more to protect you from getting injured. Your S&C, seeing your physio, making sure that you're resting and recovering, and also doing it sensibly, doing it gradually, and listening to your body in the process and cutting down when you need to. But I've also learned that I'm capable of doing more than I once thought, which is pretty cool. So let's get into the nitty-gritty. This is last week's training from start to finish, Monday to Sunday, 108 miles or 174 kilometers, as I continue to talk about what I've learned during this training block so far. And there's gonna be a lot just in 7 days, let me tell you that, because whether you realize it or not, you are learning as you're doing this. Okay, it's not just from the race and the result that you get something that's gonna help you next time around. It's really in the day in and day out and the training as well. So listen up. Monday, we kick off the week with 10.6 miles, nice and easy in the morning. It was snowing this day, and I've learned that I don't like running in the snow. So that's 17 kilometers for my metric fans out there, and not a whole lot to report from the Monday morning. Typically I'm tired from the long run the day before. Today was no different. I'd done 23 miles the day before on the Sunday, so I just listened to my body and took it at the pace that felt right, which honestly was surprisingly faster than some of my other easy days, 7:25 minute miling. But I'm really not a slave to my watch on these easy days. If I needed to run a whole minute per mile slower to feel good, or maybe not even good, but just to feel like I was taking it easy that day, I will. And you'll see that later on in this week because the pace on my easy runs really does vary. So I'll get into that later in the week. Monday evening then, oh, she was still snowing. I did just over 6.5 miles in total, roughly 10.5K. And that's because I did an easy run with the crew and then we did some strides on the track. I say we did some strides. We tried our best to do some strides. Normally I do 4 or 5 miles, some drills, and then laps of the track where I do a gentle stride on the straight and then a nice jog on the bends. And then after that, you're a little bit more warmed up, maybe you do some more drills, and then you can do some higher intensity strides. For me, 4 to 6 by 100 meters, either off of 60 seconds or I might walk the whole way back if I feel like I need to. And I'd usually put flats on for those. It was snowing and we didn't want to get cold, so we were in and out this day. And you know what? We'll be tougher for it, because if you hide away every time it snows, then what are you going to do when you get to a race and it snows? Hopefully that never happens. Following on my typical weekly structure, Tuesday then is always the first workout of the week. And I had something new this week. So by definition, learning something, even if it doesn't go well, because it's my first exposure to this session, it actually did go really well. The session I had was an alternating pace tempo. So the way it was set was a range of 5 to 7 miles, or 8 to 11.26 kilometers to be specific. And we're up at altitude, so obviously the paces are a little bit adjusted because there's less oxygen up here. But the idea is odd miles are a little bit faster in effort than threshold, and then the even miles are at kind of a steady run pace, but it's not easy. You have to really focus and actually keep checking your watch to make sure that you're not slipping into an easy run, because this is not a typical recovery. They're alternating miles and the offs are still pretty on. Let me read through the paces to start off with. Odd miles fast, even miles less fast. 5:32, 6:17, 5:30, 6:15, 5:29, 6:14, 5:26. It was just very satisfying because every mile of its respective pace got faster. Each on was faster than the one before that, and the same for my offs, which is, yeah, really satisfying. I really enjoyed this session. I'd never done it before, and I had company. My friend Phoebe jumped in for the workout, which was nice. And I remember chatting to my coach, John, after the workout, just chatting about what I'd learned from it. Because when I was in it, every time I got to an on, I felt recovered enough and ready to go to pick up the pace. But then I would get halfway through or 3/4 through and feel like, oh my goodness, I can't finish this session. But then by the time you got halfway through and off, you kind of feel ready to go again. So it kind of emulates that feeling in a race where you kind of don't know whether you're coming or going. You can get this second win. You might be halfway through a marathon and think, oh my God, 13.1 miles is still such a long way to go. But then also 13.1 miles, we're halfway done. So it's kind of playing with this positive to negative mindset, really, that you go through during a race. And yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I think that really showed me to never count myself out, because I yo-yoed from feeling like I wasn't gonna finish the workout and I was gonna fail it, to being like, oh, I'm absolutely crushing this, which was really good fun. And if you want to try that one yourself, a way that you can adapt it is do 5 to 7 miles. Let's use the same range. We're all training for a marathon, it's the same distance. Let's go for odd miles, so your faster ones are at marathon pace. Or if you're feeling spicy, maybe 5 to 10 seconds per mile faster than marathon pace. And then your offs are gonna be 45 seconds to a minute per mile slower than your goal marathon pace. And if you're in kilometers, let me just do some maths. Let's go for marathon pace, or if you're feeling spicy, 3 to 5 seconds faster than your marathon pace. And for your offs, let's go for 30 to 40 seconds per kilometer slower. Start with an on and finish with an on. So either do 5 or 7 miles. Give it a go and let me know if you love it as well. Now, because I'm an absolute mileage addict, although my session was only 7 miles, the total volume for the morning was 13.41 miles, because I do a lot of running in my warm-up and in my cool-down. So that's 21.5K for the morning. And unless I have a huge workout on a Tuesday, I always double in the afternoon or in the evening. So I did just over 5 miles, easy squeezy, or 8 kilometers in the evening. And to prove that point that I mentioned earlier about Monday, I was running at 8-minute miling. So a good 35 seconds slower per mile than I was running on Monday. And I'm so fine with that. A few years ago, I would have been absolutely horrified to hear that I was creeping into the 8s and not running 7-something minute miling for my easy runs. Hell, a few years ago, I was running like 6:30s for my easy runs. I have no idea what I was doing. And I implemented this in the Berlin block as well. I have gotten really good at just listening to my body. And that means a lot of the time slowing down and recognizing that for the easy volume, a lot of the time it is just recovery miles. Maybe it's boring, but I've actually come to really enjoy it because I know it's what my body needs, and running slower on your easy days has no negative correlation with you running slower on race day. If my track history is anything to go by, maybe it means you run faster. So that's something I've learned. Slow down. Let's do some scores on the doors. 35.65 miles. And that's just Monday and Tuesday. And now we make it to maybe one of my biggest learnings of the week. And you know, some may call it a regret. Wednesday is my medium long run day, which means I'm getting in a long run that is shorter than the long run I'm doing on Sunday. Sometimes I cut this down to 12 to 13 miles if I'm not feeling great. On a good day, when I'm really getting the volume in, I aim for 15. That is what I did this day, but the day after a session, did I need to run with the boys, whose easy pace is admittedly faster than mine? No. I didn't need to do that, but that's what I did. So I ran with a big group of guys. Rory was there, Aaron, John. These are all my teammates who are also coached by John. And they were kind to me. We ran an average pace of 7:13 minute miling, which isn't blazing hot, but we are at altitude and it was a hilly run. And there were times where I was severely questioning my decisions. But I made it. I may have wished that when we got to the top of a really big hill and they had dropped me, that they just carried on into the distance so that I could slow down, but they stopped to pee, so we all regrouped, which was fine. It was nice to have company. But will I be running with them again on a Wednesday for my medium long run at that pace? No. Nope. Lesson learned. Don't run with people that are faster than you on a day that you want to feel remotely good and try and recover whilst also getting in the miles. That's, something I've learned. Thursday is where this week gets a little bit different, because normally I would have another double day of easy running on Thursday and then my next workout on Friday before doing my long run on Sunday. But this week, my long run was my workout. They were kind of merged, if you will. So that was on Saturday. With that being on Saturday, I touched a little bit of intensity on Thursday for a mini session. Just to get a stimulus in the legs. We're not looking to build a ton of fitness with this, and they're really just sort of glorified strides. I had 10 to 14 times 200. It was snowing a blizzard outside.
Snow. We need more snow. Can't have enough snow.
So I did these on the treadmill, and when I spoke to John in the morning, he said, let's just convert them to 30 seconds. You might be running 34, 35 seconds on the track outside. For ease, we'll call them 30-second reps, and you can do them on the flat, or you can do them as hill sprints. Not the biggest fan of hill sprints, but I know that I need to do things that I'm not good at, and therefore do not enjoy, to be able to get better at them. So, after a 3-mile warm-up on the treadmill, I decided I was going to do 14, and I made it a little bit more interesting by doing 8 30-second strides. I'm not going to call them sprints because they weren't all out, on the flat, on the treadmill, and then the next 6 I did at a 10% gradient on the treadmill as a hill. And hooey! Hills are hard, aren't they? Might have taken a little bit of extra recovery on the hill reps because I could just tell that the effort was a lot higher. But I enjoyed this. It was only 2.5 miles worth of volume with a little bit of jogging in between those strides, if you will. I took a minute between each one, maybe a minute and a bit between the hill strides, okay? And this is a really great way to add a little bit of speed in to your week, but without really creating a ton of fatigue. They're so short that your heart rate doesn't get super high up and it's not really tiring you out. But at the same time, it's a nice sharp stimulus that you can get in the legs, feel a little bit poppy, and break up the monotony of a lot of easy running and a lot of tempo marathon pace style work. I'd recommend adding these in if you feel like that's something you would benefit from. Big fan of touching speed in a marathon block, even if it's just in a sprinkle like this. 2-mile cool down after that in the morning, and then I went out for an easy double in the afternoon, which was a little bit longer than usual. I normally max out at about 6 miles, and I did 7.1 this day because I just wanted to be able to get a little bit more volume in for the day to give me a slightly shorter day on Friday before doing the big one. So 7.5 miles in the morning, 7.1 miles in the afternoon. Grand total check-in by Thursday. Hello? Why is she blurry? 65.26 miles, which is 105 Ks. Friday is normally a session day with a double run in the evening, but like I said, we got a big one on Saturday, so it was another day of easy running. I did 6.5 miles in the morning, which is just under 10.5 K. I was meant to do 8 miles, and that's self-inflicted, right? I get to choose where I put my mileage because my coach lets me do that. I chose that I wanted to do 8 miles that morning, but I could not face another hour on the treadmill. So I tapped out at 6.5 miles, which is fine because my weekly volume is also a range. So that 1.5 miles, I'm not losing sleep over it. I decided to prioritize my mental well-being, and at that point in the week, I felt like doing another 1.5 miles on the treadmill might just tip me over the edge. On the slightly faster end of my easy runs, because running on the treadmill is just a little bit easier. Also, running slightly faster makes it end sooner. So 7:17 minute miling for that run. Similar pace to what I did for the medium long run earlier in the week, which is 4:32 minutes per kilometer. And then in the afternoon, made a questionable decision and agreed to go on an adventure run with Molly. Again, couldn't face going on the treadmill, so decided to run in a literal blizzard. Even my voice is like, yeah, that was a questionable decision, Philly. I only did 4 miles, but it was so sloppy because there was so much snow already on the ground and it was coming down that I ran the slowest pace of all of my easy runs for the week, 8:15 minute miling. Does that mean that the effort was low because the pace was slow? No. Running in the snow is hard. And that's something else I learned this week. And that's something I've learned in this block. Running in the snow, not for me. All right, I'm out. See ya. So a feeble 10.5 miles for Friday. Not the worst thing in the world with a big session coming up the next day.
Yes, I'll convert it.
10.5 miles is 16.9 kilometers, which brings our grand total for the week to 75.76 miles by Friday, which is, I'm getting there, all right. 121.9239 kilometers. And then it was time for the big one. And so it was time for the big one. And I'll be honest, this session on paper and in reality intimidates me. It intimidated me on Saturday and it still intimidates me now, knowing that I've got it at least 2 more times in this training block. The assignment for Saturday was a 20 to 22 mile long run, or a 32 to 35.4 kilometer long run.
If I don't have one single person in the comments thanking me for converting miles to kilometers the whole way through this video, I won't be doing it again, alright?
Within that long run, 12 to 14 miles of it, or 19.3 to 22.5 kilometers of it, are at a marathon pace effort. And in this workout specifically, that doesn't mean that I'm locking into a pinpointed marathon pace. It's a progression run that averages out at the right effort for marathon pace, and it just intensifies that long run a lot to turn it into a workout. And we had a good friend of this here YouTube channel doing the exact same session, albeit a little bit faster, on the same day. Laurie Rinkletter was also down at Camp Verde running the same long run workout as me. I gave him a head start. I didn't want to encroach on his ego or, put him off for his session, so we ran our long run workouts separately on this occasion. Now, the reason this one intimidated me, and still does intimidate me, is because there's nowhere to hide when you are running long and also fast at the same time. But it is such a good way to get fit for the marathon that if you are not implementing marathon style workouts in your long runs, you're missing a trick. So please consider adding this into your training plan if you want to run a faster marathon. I personally find them really difficult. They don't come naturally to me. I would much prefer a speedy track workout. But like I said already, the things that don't come naturally to us and the things that we are not so good at without a little bit of training are probably the things that we need to work on. Having said that, this went pretty well. It wasn't an A-star day, but it's also the first of 3 attempts at this workout in this training block, so I'm not expecting it to be perfect off the bat. I would give it a B+. Coach John is probably going to watch this and go, "What? That's not a B+? That was an A- at worst." He was really happy with it. I am my own harshest critic. I think we all are. I got to 14 miles, which is great. So I hit the higher end of the range. I was really happy with that because it meant that I got decent volume in for the day. I totaled 21.3 miles out of the 22 because I just did a 2.3 mile cool down afterwards. I was not in the mood to go to 3 and I was running very slowly at that point. And my progression looked a little bit like this. Started out at 6:23 minute miling, which is 3:58 minutes per kilometer. And the first 5 miles were pretty easy feeling. Obviously, I'm not running an easy pace, but I was able to say a few sentences, chat to Daniel on the bike, tell John that I was bored. That's where you need to be at this point into the workout, because how I felt at the end of it, I was not bored, I was hurting.
This is fine. I'm okay with the events that are unfolding currently.
I gradually worked down into the sub-6s at 8 miles, and I finished on a 5:31 mile. Nearly a minute difference in pace from start to finish, and that was my limit. I hit a ceiling and I couldn't run any faster. I would have liked to have cut down into the 5:20s, but that gives me something to reach for next time. And I also would have liked to have worked down to the faster paces a little bit earlier. I got stuck for the last few miles. I ran 5:45, 5:41, 5:41 before running 5:31, and I would have liked that to have looked a little bit neater in terms of the progression, but I'm nitpicking. And this workout was done 7 weeks out from the marathon. So room for improvement and time to make that improvement. And so the learning from this day is twofold. Number 1, do long run marathon style workouts because they make you really fit. I'm also not great at them, so I need to do them more. That's me personally. But also, number 2, there's a lot of value in not being your best yet. If I absolutely smashed that out of the park 7 weeks before the marathon, maybe I'd have run my race 7 weeks before the marathon. The only day that you want to be absolutely hot shit on fire is the race day. And during training, if you're scoring yourself a B+ most of the time, or an 85 out of 100, you're in a really good spot. Remember that one, because I know there's going to be a ton of people watching this who are their own harshest critics too. And it's really easy to say to someone else, like, oh, don't be so hard on yourself. But it's a lot harder to take that advice. I'll try if you try, okay? Got a deal? Scores on the doors by the end of Saturday. 97.08 miles. One moment. 156.23512 kilometers. Wow. And so my range for this week was 105 to 110 miles. I went out on Sunday and said I might do 8 miles and get to 105. I might do 13 and get to 110. I stuck it in the middle and ran 11 miles on Sunday. Super easy, so needed the day after a hard long run. 7:41 minute miling with Molly and Melissa. I was feeling pretty stiff, and so although when I started the run, I kind of wanted to get to 13 because what can I say? I'm a high achiever. I get given a range. I want to hit the top end of the range. But I've learned over the last few marathons, and every marathon, it becomes more and more important because I'm not getting younger either.
I was there 3,000 years ago.
You gotta listen to your body. And so when my hips are feeling stiff and I'm getting tighter into the run, that's a good sign to not be greedy and to call it. So I did that, which brought our grand total of miles for the week to a whisker over 108 miles. 174 kilometers. Can't believe I just needed to convert that when I said that at the start of the video.
I'm going to be using last week's training. It was 108 miles or 174 kilometers.
Another sign of marathon training draining the fluid from my brain. So I sort of finished filming this video, put it together, and then realized that I hadn't given you guys the payoff on what I promised right at the start of the video, which is what do I actually think my chances are at the London Marathon in a few weeks' time. And this comes at a good time because I just sat down and spoke with John, my coach, today, just to kind of have a check-in with how I think things are going, to get his take, and we're definitely both on the same page that we are definitely riding the line and we're on the right side of it in terms of pushing the right amount but not going over that so that I'm not risking getting hurt or overdoing it. It's a fine line to be treading, but I think what that means is I'm in a pretty good spot. I'm really happy with how training is going. I feel fit. At the same time, we've still got some work to do, and I've still got a good few weeks until the taper, so we're not letting up yet, but I'm feeling quietly confident. It's definitely going to be a new challenge because thinking back to Berlin, I had my own pacemaker. It was a mixed start line, and in London, I'm not going to have my own pacemaker, and it's going to be a women-only start line. I'm going to be racing the people around me, so that's a new challenge, but that's exciting. I'm going out there to race. I'm going out there to compete. I'm going out there to run fast. I think what I'm going to do is update you in a few more weeks about my specific goals for the marathon because we haven't really set them yet. Because I know I have more work to do and more fitness to build, I don't want to set goals and limit myself at this point in time, which I think is a really exciting place to be. So if you want to be part of the journey and hear what those probably pretty scary goals are when we set them, make sure you're subscribed. I'm going to be announcing that in a few weeks' time. And if you're also in the trenches of marathon training and being severely mentally tested too, I mean learning valuable lessons along the way, let me know in the comment section below, and if I've missed anything out that you guys have learned that we can share with everyone else, please share that because knowledge is power. Don't forget to love the grind.